we're going to do is we're going to introduce the panel. We're going to start over here from Larry and go down to Mike, and basically just introduce name and organization so you'll know who's talking when they're talking. Yeah.
Larry Stebbins, Pikes Peak Urban Gardens. We build community and school gardens, backyard gardens, demonstration gardens, and we hold gardening classes. So we're kind of like your backyard gardener guys there. Yeah, pass it on to Becky.
I'm Becky Elder with Pikes Peak Permaculture and Transition Manitou. I'm a gardener too. I've been a gardener all my life, organic gardener. I've been a master gardener, was master gardener for 16 years. I'm the horticultural chair for the Colorado Federation of Garden Clubs, and I sit on the Green Cities Coalition. But basically I'm what you call an activist for positive change. I have a finger in quite a few pies and a lot of friends in the audience. But I'm a gardener too. I think we're all gardeners.
Yeah.
I'm just following protocol.
Hi there, my name is Craig McHugh. I own with my wife and our 2 kids, own a small farm in Black Forest called A Joyful Noise Farm. I have to excuse my voice. I'm on the healing side of some sort of bug that my kids were kind enough to give me. So we raise a little bit of everything. We have a 10-acre farm. It's a diversified farm. We run it 4 seasons. So we raise beef, pork, chicken, both eggs and meat birds, goats for both goat meat and goat milk. We do raw milk shares. And then we also have 3 greenhouses on our property, and then 1 other greenhouse on another property that we run 4 seasons. This is our 5th year of doing this. We didn't start out as farmers. We started out in Southern California. I had an IT services company for 18 years. Sold that, came out here with no intention to farm. We got 6 chickens as a homeschool experiment, and my wife saw Food Inc., and it was game on after that. So we've slowly just grown our farm, and we call our farm sort of a historical model for a farm, which is a small farm near a city center that is growing year-round and a diversified, lots of different things on our farm that we grow year-round. So it's been an interesting journey. We are honored to be here with these folks who are some of the brighter people in our town when it comes to what we should be doing with our food security. So that's it.
My name's Christine Faith. I'm the founder and organizer of Colorado Springs Urban Homesteading, and I also run a small urban farm here in Colorado Springs. It's actually the first certified urban farm in the city of Colorado Springs. It's Ivy Wild Aquaponics and Neighborhood Farm. And then I have an education piece that I do as well under the banner Right to Thrive, and I have a blog on food and food production that I publish.
I'm Mike Calgrade. I farm and ranch and have a cattle operation in St. Francis, Kansas, which is on the Colorado-Kansas border, about 200 miles east of here. Colorado Springs and Denver are our urban centers. It's 400 miles to Kansas City from where I live in Kansas, and it's about 200 miles here. Then I also have a home here in Colorado Springs, and this is where we operate a company called Ranch Foods Direct. So we've worked on building that infrastructure for getting an animal onto your plate, and I'm also very interested in talking about the public market and that possibility here in Colorado Springs.
Great. I don't need the microphone, just keep it with you, Mike, and we'll start with you. So we're going to go into some questions right now, and we're going to go through the panel. The panel will just come down to Larry. And the first question is, what do you think is the most important element or threat facing our area related to food? And the second part of that question is, tell us a bit about how you are addressing that element or threat through your entity.
Well, I think I've worked on the market for 15 or 16 years. There's an organization called the Organization for Competitive Markets, which I was a founding member of. About Dave, was it 6 years ago, we formed CPA, the Coalition for Prosperous America, which was really about markets, about fair trade. And so really worried about the basic access to the marketplace. Does a person who produces something, whether he grows it or bakes it or builds it or whatever, does he have that ability to actually sell it in a fair marketplace and get compensated fairly? And the answer to that is no. That opportunity does not exist today for a person, particularly a person raising livestock at a volume that you can actually make a living doing. And so here I set out in western Kansas, eastern Colorado, and we're losing people. And so it's really about building a marketplace. The other thing that I think is critical to this region, this very close in region, is water. We've got to figure out whether we want to build more houses out on the eastern plains and golf courses, or whether we want to eat something. And we've got to get real busy on this water situation along the Arkansas River. That is an oasis down there with water, and it's a desert without it. And we really do need to work on that problem.
It's hard to pick just one thing that's the biggest threat. So bear with me if I wander a little bit. To sort of springboard off of what Mike was just saying, I have to agree that water is a huge issue. And as someone that really pushes the urban agriculture model, that's really where I'm nested. I'm sort of fond of saying that it's not our right to grow foods in the cities, it's our responsibility to grow food in the cities. If we're bringing water here, then that's the highest and best use for that water inside the city limit, is to grow food. So that's one piece, is that we sort of have this constraint. It's a physical restraint with the amount of water that we have. The second piece, apathy might be too strong of a word, but that's what it can feel like at times. There are just so many things competing for our time, our money, and our attention, and trying to convince folks that the investment of building up that type of infrastructure in your backyard is worth that is a little bit of a challenge. As far as what my entity does to address that, we do obviously a lot of free education, trying to share with folks what they can accomplish in their own backyard, some of the numbers, some of the stats, some of the cost savings, with a little bit of reality sprinkled in there. If you're investing in a food system, if you're investing in infrastructure, then you're paying up front. And so it does save you money, but it saves you money down the road. So trying to get folks to see that long-term vision, when's the best time to plant a fruit tree? 5 years ago, that's a standard joke. How to get folks to where we are right now and where we need to be down the road.
With the city market, or the public market, which is really kind of, I think, all why a lot of us are here or came through some way through there, is a great idea. But it also, I think, in a lot of ways brought up a lot of questions that needed answering, and I think that's where a lot of you have questions. For us, we know there's no farms here. We know all the farmers in town, and there's not very many of them. Mike Hannigan, he's not here, is he? Mike Hannigan was just on a panel last month, and they've done the surveys within 30 miles of downtown Colorado Springs. There were, by his calculations, two farms to feed more than 500,000 people. That's sort of scary. So the thing that if we're talking about food security, if we're talking about how does our city really grow and thrive, we've got to feed all of these people. If those trucks ever stop coming, we're in deep doo-doo in this town. I mean, there's going to be a lot of hungry people real quick. So how do we address that? Big farms out on the plains don't work very well. There's not a lot of water, like Christine said. So we've got to learn how to feed ourselves different than the standard model of large agriculture, big farms. We need lots of land to grow. We need to get back to a historical model, which fed this country, up until 75 years ago. No one would ever think about putting a head of lettuce on a truck in the Central Valley of California and shipping it out here. Cheap fuel makes that possible, but that's not going to be around forever. So how do we fix that problem? How do we get back to a historical model? Lots of small farms near city centers, people not only growing for themselves, but growing for an organization such as the public market, or for farmers markets, or for growing for their friends and neighbors. We, on our little 10-acre farm, we feed a lot of people. We're shocked every year how many people we can serve on our little 10-acre farm. So how do we get back to a model like that and show people you can stay at home, you can have a business running a small farm, and then addressing all the issues coming down the line here, which is water and zoning and making that paradigm shift that we all have to make here pretty soon, that we are going to have to start thinking about agriculture as part of our everyday life here. Otherwise, we're going to run into some huge barriers. We already are.
Actually, you know, there is, like Christine says, there is no one important element. I kind of see the biggest threat is a four-legged stool. First off, where we live is not an agricultural area. And so, God bless the farmers that we have, but we're never going to have a lot of farms around here. I think the future for this area is in urban farming. There's more water in the town by virtue of rainwater harvesting. There's more people to do the work. And there's plenty of wasted areas. And I include bluegrass lawns as a wasted area of water. So you have water, you have peak oil, which our whole food system is totally dependent, started out on cheap energy. Well, there is no longer any cheap energy. And if you don't know about peak oil, go Google it. We don't have enough time to go into the details about it. Water was already covered. And then also, kind of like apathy, is the belief in the system that's here now that we've all grown up in. We are all children of the oil. We grew up with lights that would go on and water that would come out whenever we wanted it. We have this undying belief in the system that is also in a peaking situation, and we're going into peak water, peak soil. And so it's kind of a four-legged stool, but it's actually a centipede. It has lots of legs. Access to land. I mean, everything is so expensive to get going, but there's all this wasted land in the city. D11 has tons and tons and tons and tons of empty lots. You know that. And so what are we doing? Pikes Peak Permaculture is an educational nonprofit. We teach mostly permaculture. We do all kinds of classes. One of the things, well, there are some permaculture gardens around the Care and Share, although I'm not sure that they're taking care of it.
They're coming back.
They're coming back. Care and Share has a beautiful permaculture-based garden. They have a nice orchard they didn't quite integrate yet, but it's in rainwater harvesting swales. They have an integrated greenhouse. There's 2 permaculture guild gardens down at the Pioneer Museum. If you want to find out more about permaculture, you can ask me later. It's really a designing system that's based on nature. Nature and everything in nature has been here a lot longer than we have with our puny little civilization. And so if we use this sustainable system that's here and create as a design base and create what we do out of that, that's what permaculture is. And so our biggest, most exciting project that Pikes Peak Permaculture is doing is we're doing a food forest demonstration garden in Manitou. And we're starting with design teams. We have 4 design teams on it right now. And we're going to do no water gardens. I mean, what's sustainable about a garden that you have to turn on the water? You know, that's not necessarily sustainable. It might be appropriate right now, but there might be a time when the water isn't there. So what can we grow without water? We're going to do biochar. We're going to demonstrate hugelkultur, rainwater gardens, everything we can possibly cram into it, we're going to. So that's our big thing, and I guess that's enough. Did I leave you some?
No, I don't think it's enough. No, I love permaculture. Is the whole planet needs to be permaculture, one big sustainable ecosystem. Okay, yeah, sounds good. By the way, for lunch today I had a calicrate hamburger, and it was delicious. I had it on the grill, and I'm not just saying that because you're here. I got a free coupon for the Indie Give, and I donated to other people. Didn't donate to you because you're in our category, Mike. But anyway, one of the things, you know, there's so much infill in the urban areas, and that's what we're here for. You know, Craig and I were talking about, you know, we love Mike's idea of a public market, you know, of where people can go to get local food, but Craig and I were talking and said, there's not enough local food. I mean, look in the wintertime, you know, good luck everybody. I mean, you're gonna get jams, jellies, squash, and pumpkins, and maybe some onions, and you won't get any of my garlic, because we eat it all. But you know, I mean, there is such a need for us to produce more local food. And I told Mike that his is like the canary in the gold mine. If he is successful with this public market, keeps it full of local food year-round, it means we have all done our job, you have all done your job of producing enough local food for us all to have enough and to share. So we're going to talk a little bit later about what each one of our projects might be to help everybody grow a little more food. But I've got a little model here first to show you. This is a 4x8 garden. And this is a family that did that. This family right there grew in just a few of these 4x8s, 70% of their fresh produce this summer. And we're going to talk about a project that's going on a little later on. But if you have 10 of these 4x8 beds in your backyard, which would be a space of about 20 by 20 feet, you can produce enough food for a family of 4. Now, you're not going to have coffee and bananas, but you can do it. And we can show you how to do it, and you follow simple principles here. Many of these are permaculture principles that Becky probably will understand, and Christine and everybody. But you can do that. So it's not hocus pocus. It's things that all of us can do, and we can do it in a space just by 20 by 20. So I think we're done with that topic, right? And then we go to the next one.
Well, y'all are doing great.
Okay.
So Tally hasn't even had to hold up her sign that says, quit talking. So that's great. So you can keep talking until she holds up that sign.
No, I'm done.
No, I know. Anyway, Tally's back there. She's going to be our person to keep us on track. All right, so now we're going to go to the next question. We'll just start with you, Larry, since you have the microphone.
Okay.
So what we've talked about already, water, land, all these other different things they're very important issues. So what can we do individually and collectively to impact our area concerning local food and local economy?
All right, well, one of the things, you know, I'm just going to talk from my vantage point here of just backyard gardens, and the reason we're all here is because each of us has a little different perspective. You know, each one of us is going to come at this problem of local foods at a different angle. Mine is gardens in the backyard, or front yard. My goodness, front yards too. But we're embarking on a project this year, and Judith Rice-Jones is back there. She's helping us out with this project as well. And we're going to be building backyard gardens in at least 10 homes in the Chamberlain and the Harrison School District area. And we might even get Helen to jump in on this one too and help out. But and maybe Richard over there. But what we're doing is we're going to bring the gardens to those low-income families that don't have the means to do it. And these are the folks that are on the SNAP program and the folks that go to Care and Share, Donna. We're going to try to take those people on the edges, on the fringes, try to get them a little more self-sufficient so they're truly in need. You know, with Care and Share can come and see you. But the others we're going to try to get off a little bit. We're going to be giving them a mentor, 2 mentors, that we're going to supply everything. We're going to supply the soil, the lumber, everything for them to grow their own food. And we'll supply 2 mentors through the whole summer. And they'll be visiting those gardens, those people, at least once every 2 weeks and usually once a week to see how they're doing, to give them tips, to make sure they're successful. This guy right here, you know, he actually produced, like I said, 70, well, that's Susie. Where's her husband there? Scott. Okay, there's Scott. And they actually produced 70% of their food that they needed. That's early in the season later. And he's going to be on Fox News tomorrow at 6:30 talking about what he did, because they were pretty impressed by him. But you can do this, and we're going to do that. Now, here's how Mike comes in on this with the public market. And this is how this is going to work. And Craig might jump in on this too. If we get enough of these pods going, for example, let's just say one of you in here says, I want to go back to my neighborhood and I want to start a backyard garden. Well, if you're a person of means, we're going to say pay for it yourself. We'll offer you the consult and free of charge and the advice and everything else. And maybe we'll get a guy like Richard over here who knows about greenhouse growing and everything else to come out. If you want to build a small hoop tunnel, you pay for it, we'll get it installed, we'll help you get it the cheapest possible, and then Richard can come out and train you on how to do it and how to make sure that you can grow properly. And if you recruit like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of your neighbors to do the same thing, you can grow enough food for yourself and enough food to sell. That's where Mike comes in. He said he would supply a truck to come around to those pods of those neighborhoods, pick up your extra produce. You can invoice him, you know, and he will then pay you for that food at a wholesale price. So you can make a little income, you can feed yourself, and we can become more food self-sufficient. It's an idea that can be replicated throughout this city if you have the will. You can do the backyard gardens cheaply, you can do hoop tunnels, you can do a collection of those too so that you can grow enough food for yourself and others. And this is the way that we can supply food locally for places like the Colorado Springs Public Market. So in the middle of winter, in those hoop tunnels, you may have some cold weather greens that can be sold there, and then people can get things that they normally could not get anywhere else at that time of year without being shipped from way across the country. So our call to action through Pikes Peak Urban Gardens is if there's anybody here who wants to start a backyard garden and wants to go back to their neighborhood and recruit 5, 6, 7 of their neighbors to do the same thing, I will meet with your group. We will work on getting supplies for you at either wholesale, reduced prices. We'll work with greenhouses around here like Dutch Heritage Greenhouse and others to get you tomato plants, pepper plants, seeds, starts, and everything else at a reduced price so that you can start growing your own food. And we'll try to do this together and see if we can't kick this up a notch. We're going to be in the Chamberlain neighborhood this year with 10 gardens in the low income. We already did 11 last year. And we're now going to cluster these throughout the city as we begin this process. If you have the means, we won't be providing any funds. If you're in a neighborhood or if you don't have the means, we'll try to find money to support that. So that's our project, and that's what we want to offer to this group and to others to help us with this local food movement.
That's great. I mean, I think we all have the same push on the neighborhood food. Before I get to that, there's plenty of things you can all do individually and collectively to impact our area on local food. First off, turn off your television. Don't get your news from TV media. How about that? Take classes, get on the ground education, get your hands dirty. It's easy to grow food. Actually, we don't grow food. Nature grows it. We just set it up and it happens. Reduce your footprint, your oil footprint. You do that by taking your money out of the industrialized food machine and invest your money locally with local growers like Craig, farmers markets. The public market idea is going to be life-changing for Colorado Springs if we can find a place for it. And then local stores, local co-ops, farmers markets. And then to get to what Larry was talking about with the neighborhood, this was kind of when we were talking about a call to action, it's like, yeah, the most local food grows in your own yard. So let's have our own yards. And so what I'm starting in my neighborhood on, and I'm just starting, is talking to my neighbors. I've made a little questionnaire about food because I really don't know who all in my neighborhood is going to be into growing food. Frankly, the foothills of Manitou isn't like, you know, a jungly place. It's hard to grow food there. And so I would like to map all the fruit trees in Manitou. This is a transition town project of where does the fruit grow. There's fruit that grows like on the hillside. There's peach trees that actually produce peaches that are in nobody's yard in Manitou. There's apricots that are in nobody's yard in Manitou. And so if you know where those are, you can come get a share. There's currants on the hillside. So where are these things? You know, and where are the ones I don't know about? So mapping it, getting a map of the fruit, and talking to your neighbors. There's plenty of elderly people who used to grow a lot of food because that's where they came out of, growing food. My own mother had a victory garden, and they're too old to do it. And then there's young people who have no access to land. So if you know your neighbors, Why can't you partner with your neighbor? That's a beautiful apple tree you have. Can I put in some food and I'll do all the work for you? Use your land and I'll give you some food. Not that you're that old, Craig. But, you know, the idea is that we have to really re-community ourselves because we don't know what it's like to be a community, really. You know, we're good independent Americans. I've got mine, and if you don't have yours, what's wrong with you? That's really not the way to have a community. It's all about sharing, like you said. So looking in my neighborhood for land that's not being used. Actually, the food forest is in my neighborhood. So we have a few people from the neighborhood that are interested in participating in that and where that food's going to go. So we'll be sharing the land, sharing the work, and sharing the harvest in my neighborhood, in your neighborhood. There's actually a neighborhood in Shooks Run that is doing this very thing. We have 7 people, 6 people are growing food. The 7th is the chicken person. I mean, every group should have a chicken person. And if you don't have chickens, you're really missing out. You should like adopt some. But anyway, and they grow, like one person's growing all the squash, one person's growing the tomatoes or whatever, and one person's growing the beans. And then they rotate the crops the next year so that they're keeping, and they just started this year. It's like, this is all fresh stuff. This is happening now. This is taking a step into the great turning that we all need to do. We all really need to turn this direction and put our energy into being indigenous to this place, not overlaid on this place like a postage stamp. We live here, we are of here. Our food should be of here. Let's see. I don't want to cover anybody else's. Other things you can do is spend your water consciously. Spend your water consciously. Plant perennial food systems. Permaculture is very big on perennial food. It's not that we don't grow tomatoes and we don't have annual plants. It's that we focus on the perennial plants. And there's a poster over here that just shows what a tree does. Just a tree in its environment. The whole food forest theory is that you're not planting on a flat plain. You are a food forest, has a canopy, an understory, a shrub layer, a perennial herb layer, a ground cover layer, root crops. Oops, sorry. Root crops. Broke my finger.
It's right there.
And vines. And so you're not just growing on the ground or in the ground, but you're also harvesting these other layers of your forest all the way up. And of course you can bring animals in, which is something that someone else is going to talk about. And greenhouses as well. There is no way this area will be sustainable for food without greenhouses. We are not, I mean, look at where we live. It's a desert. It's a desert, no water. The climate change is huge. You got to have a greenhouse. Or we have to support people who have greenhouses. And permaculture, let me just say one more thing, is small is beautiful. To me, if everybody had their own greenhouse, we'd be a lot more secure than if everybody relied on one great big greenhouse that someone else was running. Thanks.
There's an organization, it's a farm actually, started in Devon, England in 2002. It's called Riverford. If you ever want to go look them up, it's riverford.co.uk. In 2002 they started, it was one guy with one farm that was 35 acres. And its first year in business they delivered 32 CSAs, which is a big deal for them. Today, Riverford delivers 40,000 CSAs a week to the London area. It's Riverford, the original farm is still, it's 35 acres, and it's a series of small farms. And what they did is they did kind of what we're talking about here. They got together, they had a series of small farms, they built a direct-to-the-consumer model, which is something like we're talking about here with the public market, and they were able to revitalize an entire farming area that had essentially gone dormant and died because you couldn't afford to farm anymore. So here is, inside of 10 years, a farm with one guy with a vision has gone from feeding 32 people to feeding 40,000 people a week. It's an amazing model. And we have the ability to do that here as well. I'm out in Black Forest, but just a little bit north of Black Forest, huge amount of land that's just sitting there fallow. They grow cover crops on it, and they grow alfalfa for horses. But really, there's an enormous amount of land here. So we can. How do we get? The question I always ask myself is, how do we get people who, like myself, wanted to get back to the land, and we get people every day at our farm who want to come and learn how to get back to the land. How could we create a system that would allow them to meet a lot of these requirements that we've sort of set before ourselves with this public market of food security for our city, for buying local, and for retaining those agri-dollars here in our city?